interesting or playing
So good morning.
football, baseball.
Tori passed out the Seek to Be Faithful, which is for the second half of the class. The first half of the class, we're going to finish up the handout we had from when I was here 2 weeks ago. If you didn't get that one or you're interested in that, you can have one of these. I had some extra copies from last time. So in fact, I'm going to let you have that. So if anybody would like one, this was the overview from last week. So we'll put this over here as well. So good morning, I'm Kathy Bubb. I'm a certified Christian educator in the Presbyterian. I was here 2 weeks ago, and I applaud those of you who came back, even though I was here 2 weeks ago. We were pleased, my husband David, who's your preacher today, who's sitting there. It was fun to read that Nate Terry was here last week. Nate was the organist at Mifflin when we were there for a while. We were part of discovering Nate. No, not really. But he joined us in November of 19, right before COVID hit. And he was such a blessing for us during COVID because he was willing to come all the time and had all kinds of excellence. So anyway, we were both preaching other places last week, or we would have been here to be with Nate. So again, thank you for being here. We're week 2 on tools for tough talks. Not that we have any tough talks going on in our world today. Election's done, so all that's over with, right? No, we can turn the page, move on to something else. Yeah. So, but no, more than ever, we need these tools for these difficult conversations that we have. So the handout that I had before, and again, there's a few more copies if you want to have a look at that. But we basically, we're going to finish this up and then go on to the other piece that I handed you. We talked a little bit to start with. Those of you who were here might remember why talks seem tougher these days. And one of the things we talked about was that there are forces who benefit from our divisions. And that could be really, to me, when I get in my doom scrolling rage, someone is benefiting from me being so upset about this. Be it politicians, being the media, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb in conspiracy theories to say foreign countries who are benefiting from the division in the United States.
Yep.
So that I just think helps kind of put the whole thing in perspective to say one of the reasons we don't want to get stuck into that is because of who this benefits, right? So in running through our tools, part of that is to take away the power of the politicians, the social media, and the foreign countries in dividing us as a people. Yes?
I have a shirt from our mission trips a long time ago, and on the back it says, "Out of chaos, hope." And I put that on this week, and I said, that's really it.
Okay. She has a shirt. She wears a mission trip. It says on the back, "Out of chaos, hope." So I think that's a good motto for us. So we talked to them last week. So knowing that that's part of the deal, when our tough talks, we are pushed to be part of our team, and that our team is right no matter what our team does, and no matter what they say. And the reminder that it's helpful if we take off our jerseys and to really examine issues, not based on what our team says we should do, but on what on we think is right. So with that sort of a background, we talked about, first off, we prepare ourselves, because the only thing you really have control over is you. You're not going to be able to change the mind of that sibling, uncle, child, grandparent. You are not responsible for that. You're responsible for you. So how can you go into these tough talks the best way you can? So some of the things we talked about last week, which we'll hit on a few more, this week, well, that tie into the first really is to be grace-filled. We need to go into these conversations being grace-filled. And how do we get grace-filled? By making, as I told you last week, my father says, making diligent use of the means of grace. Those means of grace through prayer, through study, through worship, through fellowship, through service. You know all those things, right? We need to make diligent use of those things, which will fill us with grace so that we'll be able to give that to other people. So we need to start that for ourselves. Use the Ephesians 4 passage. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. That needs to be our center point. Another we talked about was examining your why. Why is this topic important to you? And when we examine our why, it's going to lead us to a better understanding for someone else, which we're going to get to more in a minute. And then we talked about being clear on assertions versus assessments. And I was pleased that you all have the same problem with those words that I do. Our author of this book, which I remembered this week, How We Ended Racism, which is a very provocative, a good book. I would encourage you to read it. But the authors there make the distinction between those things that are assertions, that we are certain, factual, that's why I'm working on remembering it, assertions and assessments. Let me just read something briefly, because I think this is very important with the results of the election as well as they were before. So I'm going to read a little bit from the author here. The most important thing to know about truth is this. There is a difference between assessment and assertion. For example, an assertion, Justin is 5 feet 10 inches. The assessment is Justin is tall. The assertion is it's 65 degrees outside. The assessment, that's cold outside. Assertions are facts. Assessments are subjective stories we create. Assertions are verifiable by multiple sources, measurable, often unchangeable, objective, can be labeled true or false by commonly agreed upon standard. Assessments, on the other hand, can never be verified as true or false because they come through the lens of subjective experience. We create assessments from our own perspective. In other words, a height of 5 feet 10 inches and a temperature of 65 degrees are measurable and practically inarguable. They are simply data points. They can be labeled as true or false. Those are facts. But when one might consider Justin, who stands at 5 feet 10 inches, to be tall, in other cases, he might be considered short. I'm going to throw in a quick story here. Dave and I lived in Santiago, Chile for a while, and we were taking Spanish classes while we were there. And Chilean people, as a whole, as many people from Latin America, are shorter than the average American. And so our Spanish teacher was about my height, I would say. And so when we were, doing our very basic, trying to teach us, pointed David, and he said of David, David es alto. David is tall. David's never, I won't make you stand up, but Dave's 5'9.5", not normally considered tall. But for our teacher, he was tall. David didn't change heights, right? And so, anyway, so that, I just want to throw that little story in. Let's see, similarly, the temperature, yeah. Someone who spent most of their adult life in Los Angeles or Miami, 65 is chilly. But to someone who has lived in upstate New York or Montreal, 65 can warrant wearing a bikini or inspiring a tan if the sun is out. The truth in these cases changes depending on the circumstance, subjective perspective, and experience. But in general, the truth should be unwavering, right? Here's the important thing to remember. With assertions, the main data points always stay the same, regardless of who's looking at them. Assessments, on the other hand, require an opinion or judgment, which is always subjective. Always subjective. Two people can experience the exact same assertions, yet create contradicting assessments based on how they interpret and internalize their experience. Then goes on and talks about grounding. So what's important, when you make your assessment, in what are you grounding it? it's got to be more than just a feeling, right? You want to collect and have these experiences. You're all welcome to come on in. You don't have to hover in the back, and then you can run out in a huff. David promised he'd run out in a huff a little bit later. So he states that human beings are hardwired to be assessment-making machines. We make assessments every single day. Those people are dangerous. She's not very competent. Yet all assessments are not created equally. Can be grounded or ungrounded. So, as I said, I think part of that, just let me finish this real quick, and then I'd love to hear your thought. Part of that is, as we look at the results of the election, right? The assertion, what is certain is there are numbers associated with how many voted for Trump and how many voted for Harris, right? That's, what are the assessments? She was too woke. She was not woke enough. She was too liberal. She was too conservative. She was too woman. She was too black. She was too, the public knew too much. The public didn't know enough, right? Those are all assessments, right? Those are all subjective. People are all basing those over their interpretation of things. Some are more grounded than others, right? But the only fact, the assertion, the thing that is certain is the numbers. And so, again, I just think it can be helpful for us when we have our own arguments in our head and our own why of any particular topic, that we say to ourselves, okay, am I grounded in this? Is my assessment very grounded, or am I kind of going with my emotion and my feeling and my gut, but I don't really have much to back it up? So please.
Well, I'm just going to comment. I'm so glad you defined those terms, because in my background in nursing science, assessments are data-driven.
Yeah.
And assertions would be opinions.
Yes, thank you. And we talked about that last week, that we're not sure we agree with the author on his use of words. So what I will point out is, you can use the words in your nursing background. I'm not telling you have to use the words the way our authors did, but I think those are two important distinctions, whatever words you want to put on them. The things that are fact-based versus our opinion on them. And we need to be clear in our minds before we talk to anybody else. Okay, which are fact-based and which are my opinion. But yes, thank you. Yeah, we had a whole thing last week on the words, and I kept getting them wrong as I was trying to use them in class. A couple more. One was own your own emotions, and Tori went out and got us you all beautiful feeling wheels. If you didn't pick one up, there's copies here. There's also, if you have really good eyesight, there's little teeny tiny wheels. But maybe you're a sticker person.
I didn't know they were that small when I ordered them. I thought they were bigger. So.
Yeah. But hey, if you're a sticker person, they're really nice, or your reading glasses work well. Or some of you that are younger don't need those. But this, again, getting in touch with, I'm so angry. Well, let's look at angry. Is your anger, is that sarcastic or skeptical? Is it suspicious, withdrawn? Are you irritated? Are you infuriated? Are you hostile? Are you provoked? Are you enraged? Are you furious? Helping you kind of narrow in on your own feelings about a topic. Likewise, you can always go the other direction. I feel powerless in this situation. What is that really? What's the core of that? I'm sad. I'm really sad about this. So anyway, you can have some fun with the feelings wheel. The other two then we ended with on preparing yourself with being humble, right? I think William Sloane Coffin said, speak with the confidence that you may be right and the humility that you may be wrong, right? And so going into things with humility, which can be really hard when we know we're right. But you got to dig deep and find that sometimes. And then the last, which is all of this, commit to being your best self, the best version of you when you have these tough conversations. So then we talked about turning outward. So you prepared yourself, turning outward. Giving grace. Give that grace that you have received. Acknowledge that the people that you are talking to, that person is also a beloved child of God. And you might have to say that to yourself a whole lot of times. But that person is also a beloved child of God, right? One more time. That person is also a beloved child of God, right? And so that's part of that giving that grace. When we are filled with God's love and God's grace, we're more able to give it out to other people. So our conversation needs to start with that. Another thing we mentioned in some of the practical things in giving grace was being mindful of things like the time you're trying to do this. As David's heading into the sanctuary, it's not the time to say, hey, I just want to let you know that I totally disagree with how you voted. Okay, fine. You can't spring conversations on people, right? If you really want to have this tough talk, find the time, find the location that works for both of you, right? Use I statements when you talk about, I feel upset, I feel hurt, I feel confused. And remember, those I statements don't count. I feel that you are dumb. That doesn't count as an I statement. You do not get credit for using an I statement when you say that as much as you'd like to. So we talked about some of those things as well. And then we were moving. I think that kind of covered last week. Was there anything anybody took away from last week that I haven't gone over yet that you really want to share? Because we're going to move on and figure out the rest of this. Okay, so one, which we kind of touched on with the other, is being curious. Be curious about the other person. I have a friend who we just had dinner with this week who, well, I'll use her real name because you know these people. Lynn, who was very concerned that another person in the church, Paul, knew he was voting opposite how she was in this election. And it really, really bothered her. And she just wasn't sure what to do about it. And so she called up Paul and said, can we get together? I really want to hear what you have to say. And so he went over and she said when she sat down, I'm not here to tell you what I think. I want to hear from you. And she said, and his body just went, oh, okay. Because he was geared up for the fight. And she said, I just want to understand. I just want you to tell me why. And she said, it was a great conversation. And so she went in curious. Why do you think this? Can you tell me why this topic? Remember, we're supposed to examine our own why. Find out from them. Why is this important to you? When I did a class on racism in Mifflin a couple years ago. And in talking about, one of the intro questions in the class was what was a experience of racism or racial conflict that you had growing up? And went around the circle, and when we got to this particular person, she said, I didn't grow up with racial conflict. She said, our little town in Eastern Kentucky, there weren't any black people. So I didn't know there was such a thing as racial conflict. And then one black family moved in, and they were very nice, and they got along with everyone. So I'm not sure what this whole racism thing is all about. But it was so helpful to hear that story because that frames her whole understanding. And so rather than, judge her and jump down her throat for beliefs that she might have, oh, okay, I kind of get why that formed your understanding. Can you now hear this person's story of what has formed their understanding? And so being curious and really asking the questions and really getting into the why and resisting the temptation to say, okay, but now here's mine. Really, really put out there, you really want to know. And ending that conversation with, thank you for sharing. And when they say, well, what about you? Say, well, let's do that at another time. And they'll be very surprised that you actually wanted to hear what they had to say. So, something to think about. Validate their feelings, right? They are scared, right? They are hurt. They are angry. and I had some pushback, I should say this, when I taught this at the Presbyterian thing. Maybe validate isn't the right word, but acknowledge. I get that this makes you mad. I get that you're scared. I understand, I hear that in you. And again, that's why the feelings chart, you probably can't say, here, please point to how you feel on my feelings chart so that I can better understand you. But it is for you when they talk about that they are feel vulnerable. What's kind of the root of that? And that maybe again you can have more empathy for another person when you kind of really can dig through under the loud mad. What's the real thing that they're feeling in this? And often it's scared. People are scared that the country isn't the same as it was. People are scared of what's coming. People are scared that the institutions they have always held on to seem to be crumbling. People are scared. How do we respond to fear, right? Which is maybe a whole nother good topic. How do you respond to fear in yourself and in others? But acknowledging it is a good place to start. Another one, then, what I have written here is call them forward, not out. I think this was in this book, I'm pretty sure. But I like that image of calling people forward, not out. So if I called you out, David, I can't believe you're so dumb and would do that. I can't believe, how could you vote for that person? What are you, a moron? Calling somebody out might feel really good, but what happens? What's David's reaction to those words of mine?
You've attacked him.
He's saying,
I've attacked him? How is he going to respond now?
Angry.
He's going to be angry. He's going to shut down, most likely. Either fire back or shut down. Is that our purpose? Is that what we want to do? No. So to call David out is using phrases more like, wow, David, I'm trying to understand this and I don't understand. I'm calling you forward. I want to move forward in a relationship or a conversation together, right? Rather than calling them out and saying you so-and-so, to call them forward, which is, again, making yourself more vulnerable. Again, things like, I'm really having a tough time understanding. Can you explain it again? Can you, or being able to say, I really disagree on that. But your tone of voice, your body language, your really being your best self really can call someone forward to maybe have them examine their own motivations and words better. Now, again, you're not in charge of anybody else. You can't make anybody else do it, but you can bring out the best in you. Does that make sense? Any examples of that? Yeah, please.
This reminds me of stuff that is truth and reconciliation, which we're so unable to do. We have tried since then, lots of countries and in this country, with reparations to make some headway. But we're getting, it seems to me, that's a step that we miss because we're not talking, we're not listening. We may be hearing, but we're not listening to other people's experience, and then they will listen to ours.
Yeah. Good, thanks. Not Dave?
I was thinking before when you talk about this, it's also calling them forward to new possibilities, kind of combines with the look for common ground ahead. New ways of understanding this, so you are offering another path, not just you're stupid, but I wonder if we might look at it, can we agree on this? Forward in terms of common ground kind of thing, which you're moving into.
Yes, and that's excellent, which again, as he said, he moved me along, so we don't run out of time. Looking for common ground. So to me, what was a helpful example of this is people who are on different sides of the abortion issue. You have people who are very pro-choice. You have people who are very anti-abortion, right? Isn't there common ground? What could be the common ground? Would it be a true statement to say to your person, we would all like a world where abortions were rare? Wouldn't we all like a world where every baby that was born was a wanted, healthy baby? Is that something we can agree on? I'm guessing probably. Okay, so if that's the case, then what can we work on together? Can we agree we don't think there should be hungry children in the world, right? We can agree on that part, right? Okay, if we can agree we shouldn't have hungry children, what could be a step or two we could take that would work on that? Maybe you don't think it should be the government. Maybe you think it should all be churches. Maybe you think it should be. Okay, but let's start with, we don't think there should be hungry children, right? So finding that common ground and calling people forward rather than being mired and entrenched in, I know the right solution to a problem, right? Is acknowledging, let's think together on this, right? Now, yes, please.
Well, I tried a different approach because I didn't really want to get into the big discussion.
Okay.
My next door neighbor is very conservative. I know that because of the church she goes. And so there was a disagreement about the abortion issue. And I said, well, I don't want this to cause a problem between us. And I said, because you're such a good neighbor and we do help each other out a lot. And I said, so I just, hope this doesn't cause a break in our friendship and everything. And we hugged each other, and that was that.
And see, I didn't even pay Sheila to go on to the next one, which is embracing the paradox, which is there are loving, good, faithful Christian people who believe differently than you do on really difficult topics, who voted different than you do, right? And it is so easy, right, to say, how can that person is a good Christian and I know they, lead a Sunday school class and they sing in the choir and they do, but they voted for X? How is that possible, right? We've heard it, we've said it, but that's a paradox, right? We have to be okay with that because we can't solve it anybody else, right? All we can do is for ourselves, be our best person, have the opportunities, embrace the other person, be curious, listen, be grounded so that when they do say false things, when they have these false, we'll use the language assessments, we can come back with, well, no, actually, if you're interested, here's some facts that might be interesting to you, right? You can offer that, but that paradox is there, right? And that's the toughest, I think, one of the toughest things in this for me. Which really leads to the last little set, which as I mentioned last week, quoting the famous theologian Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. Sometimes in these tough talks that we either choose to have or are thrust upon us, you're not going to get anywhere. The person is not going to listen. They have no desire to either be their best selves or be grace-filled or to be curious. They just don't. And I think it's okay to say that's just not worth your time and your energy and your effort. And whether your line is we'll just have to agree to disagree, whether your line is a little more serious, that just isn't a person that you're going to really be able to spend much more time with because they don't value your boundaries. They don't value your approach to talking something, that you might just have to say, I'm sorry, I'm done. We're not, I don't want this to mess up our friendship, our relationship, our Thanksgiving dinner. Can we just not do this? And that can be really tough too, but we do need to have our own boundaries, right? And for some people, they are very comfortable continuing, but wait, I want to understand more. Let's sit down, let's really dig in, let's share. And some of us just don't have that, right? We don't have that bandwidth, we don't have that energy. You have to know for yourself, but it's okay to say, I can't do this. I just can't. This very same person that my friend Lynn talked to, I thought about sitting down with Paul and saying, talk to me. And I decided for me, Terry, I couldn't do it. It was just going to be too much. But Lynn did, and she could, and it was great. And so I'm happy for her. But at that point, I just couldn't do it. I knew I didn't have it in me at that time. So again, there's not a one right answer for anybody on this. You just have to know it's okay for you to say, I just can't engage. I just can't. I'm out. And hopefully somebody else will take up the baton. Sorry. I didn't mean to get all verklempt on you there. One of the books I read talked about talkable and untalkable people. And again, you just went through the mental Rolodex of who those people are, right? People who are just not talkable. They have no interest in learning, growing, conversation, exchange. I did have, when we did this at Presbyterian, though, I had a pastor push back to say, as a leader of the church, I can't really say some people are untalkable. He says, I don't have that luxury. Right? And so some of you as church leaders, it's harder for you to say, no, not going to engage with you. And I understand that's a harder challenge.
I've got a question.
Yes, please.
I understand what you're saying in terms of individual to individual, but sometimes it's a group.
Okay.
And well, I'm curious to hear then, because if it's a group, it's a lot more impact if one has to remove oneself from that. So is this referencing individual to individual?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, well, this first part. See, you guys are so good at this. Your handout that we're going to talk about in a minute is more for group situations. But this is really, these were more specifically for me talking to you, you talking to you, sort of thing. So the last thing in this, because I do want to get to the handout briefly, is just the Romans 8 passage. Sorry, Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with one another. Right? You've done your best. You went in as your best self. You went in curious. You went in listening. You went in with the desire to call forward, to find common ground. You did what you could. If the other person responds, that's a wonderful thing. And if they don't, you did the best you could, right? And that's really all we can do. All we can do is be in charge of our own selves. And so, I don't know if that'll help moving into Thanksgiving or not. Yeah, Dave.
One thing I was going to say is we've rightly been framing this with some big societal issues like the election and racism, abortion, that sort of thing. But this is a lot of the same stuff when I do premarital counseling or marital counseling is, individual issues that maybe aren't that grand, but it's the same thing. Have the right time, be curious, listen, and compromise. Is it anything from why are you always late? Why are you so anxious when I'm late? All of those things. Or why does it upset you that I don't? Whatever, take out the garbage when I say I'm going to. Those are off. A lot of this it carries over to all kinds of different relationships.
Yes.
It's not just giant ones, which they're all tough. The I statements in any personal relationship too.
Right. Good. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I want to end this part, and then we're going to look at the handout briefly. Thomas Paine said to argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. So I just want to throw that out, sort of end with that sometimes you just can't move on. But again, thank you so much for the question about this. Yeah, and so there's some more handouts of this. This is a document, Seeking to be Faithful Together, that came out in, I was looking for the date on here, 1992 General Assembly. So for some of us, 1992 isn't that long ago. For some of us, it's a really long time ago. But this is a document that actually David and I have used in every church we've served together in some form or fashion, and have found it to be super helpful, particularly for use by sessions before there's conflict. So if you have a look, Seeking to be Faithful Together, Guidelines for Presbyterians in Times of Disagreement. And it has the three main sections, biblical based, say, in the spirit of trust and love, we promise we will. And here are the three things. Give them a hearing, listen before we speak. It has the scripture references. Speak the truth in love, and maintain the unity of the spirit and the bond of peace. So those are the framework, the three pieces of the framework for this guidelines. And then within each one, they also have three areas. And again, these are going to sound familiar because a lot of these are what we've talked about. But again, this has been very helpful for a session or a group to review before the conflict comes. So when the conflict comes, notice I said when, not if. When the conflict comes, you have developed some guidelines for how you're going to talk about this together. So this first section here, give them a hearing, listen before we answer. Very simple ones. Treat each other respectfully so as to build trust. Believing we all desire to be faithful to Jesus the Christ. We will keep our conversation and communications open for candid and forthright exchange. We will not ask questions or make statements in a way that will intimidate or judge others. I think what they could have added on that one is we will not be quiet in the meeting and then go out in the parking lot and tell the people what we're doing. I'm not talking about anybody in particular in here, but all of us in general. But isn't that part of it? How can we have trust on a topic? So let's pick something just really, really controversial. What color should the carpet be in this room? Right? And we've had a meeting, right? And we're going to treat each other respectfully, keep our conversation and communication open, don't make statements that will intimidate or judge others. We're going to have that open conversation in the room. Everyone, we're clear, we're open. Again, and so you don't hold it in and say out in the hall to your best friend who's also in that committee, I can't believe they didn't bring up whatever. Well, you didn't bring it up, right? So we have to be respectful in those situations. Second, learn about the various positions on the topic of disagreement. Let me hear from you. Why do you want orange carpet? Why do you want the bright pink? Why do you love the blue? Right? You listen to other people. And again, and we know this, don't listen and prepare your response while you're pretending to be listening, right? Which again, we all do, right? But do your best to really listen. Oh, the blue, because blue is our historic color. I never thought that, right? Be open to listening. Third, state what we think we heard. Ask for clarification before responding in an effort to be sure we understand each other. So you wanted orange carpet because you feel like orange is the historical color of the PCUSA. Okay, is that what you said? Yes. Oh, no, that's not what I said. So again, using the statements to make sure. So we want to give them a hearing, listen before we answer. That first part is all about really listening. Again, it's the not sitting with the arms crossed and the eyes rolling, really listening. Yeah, Dave.
And from being in session, exactly, being in session meetings and other meetings, I realized that it's not just words that can be judgmental. The eye roll or the or what there's lots of ways to communicate that judgment.
And the glance that you make to the person across the table who agrees with you, that you think nobody else sees, they see. I'm telling you right now. Somebody else caught that thing that you did. Other people saw it, right? So give them a listen. So the second group then is all in Speak the Truth in Love. Share our concerns directly with individuals or groups with whom we have disagreements in a spirit of love and respect in keeping with Jesus' teaching. This is also the parking lot thing, right? I can't believe she said she wanted orange carpet, but I'm not saying that to the person who wanted orange carpet, right? I'm saying it to everybody else, but not to that person. I worked in a church, the very first church I worked in, and the pastor with whom I didn't have a very good relationship, on a few topics would bring me into his office and would say, some people are concerned about the way you do something. Who would that be? Well, it's some people. So it became the running joke in my family that, some people, I think they're in the third pew back, some people, or they're just in the pulpit. And that was his way of, but it's that share with directly. If you have a concern, right? Pretty sure that's biblical too. Go to the person. If they don't give you a hearing, take someone else. If they don't give you a hearing, right? But share your concerns directly. The fifth one, focus on ideas and suggestion instead of questioning people's motives, intelligence, or integrity. We will not engage in name calling or labeling of others prior to, during, or following the discussion, right? And I'm saying this to a group of mature adults, but I've heard it. I've been in meetings where there's the name calling. Why? Because passions, feelings have run so high, people feel like they're not being heard, they've been belittled, the passion rises, and they said, how can you be so stupid as to think orange is a good color for this carpet? Right? How is that helpful? How is that helpful? Right? We've got to refrain, we've got to focus on the suggestion and the ideas, not people's intelligence and integrity. And then the sixth one, which we've also covered, share your experience about the subject of disagreement so that others may more fully understand your concern. For me, orange, I was traumatized by orange carpet when I was a child. I had the orange carpet was in the house of the bully of the school, and I had to go to, I'm getting kind of lost in my orange carpet thing. I realize that. But when you share your personal experience, this is why this is important to me, right? You're not doing the name calling, you're not doing the you people, for me, this is why this is personal. Because even if you don't persuade, they're going to understand you better, right? And so sharing your personal experience is important. Then the last, actually, I lied. There's actually 4 in the last one. In maintaining the unity of the spirit and the bond of peace. Indicate where we agree with those of other viewpoints as well as where we disagree. Again, find the common ground. Oh, okay, I get why you might want that orange carpet. What if we did orange and pink plaid in here? Like I said, yeah. I just gave some of you a heart attack.
You don't want a high-rise interior.
No. But again, where do you agree? Yes, you're right. We do need new carpet in here. It is warm. I agree on that, right? Find the points of agreement. Seek to stay in community with each other. Though the discussion may be rigorous and full of tension, be ready to forgive and be forgiven. Stay in community. Go to the neighbor and say, hey, I know we really disagree on this, but I want us to we're still here in this church together, right? We're still, let's stay together. Follow additional guidelines when we meet in decision-making bodies. And again, this is often part of session training. Urge people of various points of view to speak and promise to listen to those positions seriously. Make sure everybody on opposing sides gets to talk and really listen. Don't cut people off. Seek conclusions informed by our points of agreement. Yes, we're all agreed that we need a new carpet, right? Be sensitive to the feelings, concerns of those we do not agree with, the majority, and respect their rights of conscience. Now, I think ideally in churches, decision-making should be consensus. It often isn't. because if you're not reaching consent, you still got to make the vote, right? For those who are on the losing side of the vote, be attentive to them. Make sure they know they're still part of the community. Abide by the decision of the majority. And if you disagree with it and way to change it, work for that change in ways that are consistent with these guidelines. That means try not to take your ball and go home, right? If you lost the vote on the carpet, don't say, well, I'm never coming to this room again because I'll hate this carpet. You know, be stick with be a team player. Now, and again, and I acknowledge, and particularly on bigger issues, sometimes we can't say that, right? Sometimes it's just too much. If this church voted, you're no longer going to have women in the pulpit. I would assume for some of you, that's a deal breaker to stay in the church, right? You have to know for yourself, what are the deal breakers? I just encourage you as a church to be mindful that not everything is a deal breaker, right? That there's some things you can get over, you can get through if the vote doesn't go good. Dave was going to, you're going to stomp out though. Stomp out angrily. It kind of makes a little more dramatic presentation. And then including our disagreement in our prayers, not praying for the triumph of our viewpoints. Oh, wait, I should underline that again. Not praying for the triumphs of our viewpoints, but seeking God's grace to listen attentively, to speak clearly, to remain open to the vision God holds for us. Right? So the other pages that Tori copied for us is really how to implement this. So if you were on session, if you were in another group, a study group, this class, it talks through where these came from, has a question and answer session. How could you use these guidelines in your congregation? Anyway, it just has some suggestions on implementing. So if this is something that intrigues you, that you think could be helpful, the other pages just tell you how you could go about that. You may decide it's enough that you shared it for this 10, 15 minutes in class. But as I said, Dave and I have used it in 3 churches we've served together in session training and took time to talk about each one on a slightly more serious topic than your carpet color in here. But found it to be helpful so that in the practice, so that when the real conversation comes, you can say, now remember, these are the guidelines we're going with. And when someone veers into name calling or you heard the parking lot conversation, say, remember, we said we'd follow these guidelines. Right? And it's just I think it's a good call to each of us to be our best selves as we have these conversations. So anyway, we'll leave those with you. Remember over there, there's feeling charts as well. So let's close with a word of prayer. Loving God, it can be a challenge to be in conversation with people with whom we feel we have lost a common sense of what is right and what is wrong. Help us just to be our best selves, to fill ourselves with grace, to remind ourselves we're talking to your beloved children. Help us to bring to our conversations curiosity, a desire to move forward in our conversations, but also with the acknowledgement that sometimes we have to set boundaries, that when people become too exhausting, too confrontational, too stressful, that it's okay to say, I'm out. Lord, help us as churches, as sessions, as congregations, to be loving, to speak your truth in love, to maintain the unity and the purity of the church. Help us in all these things, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.